It's time for Parts in the Sum of the Whole. A weekly podcast designed to inform the masses on just about any topic you can think of. We always encourage your comments, so drop us a line. And now, from our world headquarters in Bidwell, Ohio, here's the philosopher monk, Ronnie Glenn, and the Vance man, Brian Vance.
Hey everyone, welcome back to show number 3, already 3 down, Ronnie. I can't believe we've already done 3 shows.
I can't believe we got past week 1.
Week 1 was a little rough, week 2 was a little rough. I think we're just starting to get our flavor. Well, I think if people listen all the way through to this show, they're going to see just a tad bit of a difference from the last 2. And it takes a little time to get better.
I guess so. If nothing else, there's a lot more of other people talking in this one.
Yeah, that's right. We have a lot of sound bites because, we're going to be needing some other people to help us out. Again, welcome to the show. I want to thank last week's winner of a Taco Bell gift card. It was Amanda Siders-Chafin. She's listening up in Williamson, West Virginia, I believe.
She sent me a nice little thank you message, and that was really cool.
Well, yeah, that was cool. And she posted it on our site, the fact that she received our winner's certificate.
Oh, yeah, the picture. I saw that.
That makes me feel good that she appreciated it that much. This week, we have trivia question coming up inside our show a little bit later on, but we're going to give you a chance to win an iTunes gift card. Now, this is the latest music, movie, TV shows, games, apps, a little bit more you can use this card for. And, of course, not only you download it to your computer, but you can download to any Mac, PC, iPhone, iPod, iPod Touch, or iPad. And it'll come in handy for any of you big iTunes fans.
Y'all just spend in the iTunes store.
I love iTunes. I have my iTunes. You have your iTunes?
I have an iPhone. Of course I have my iTunes.
Okay, you have. Okay, you're got all the technology. I just have
Oh, come on.
a little wooden bicycle outside. I pedal to power my internet.
I have an iPhone 3. I barely have an iPhone.
Well, before we get into our meat of the show, we do want to mention some of the things that have occurred breaking news-wise within our broadcast recording and it airing today. We, of course, had that crazy gunman in Santa Monica, around the Santa Monica Community College, I believe it was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't actually a school shooting, they're saying. It was kind of outside of the school and inside of the school a little bit.
I think if it occurs in any general area of a school, they're going to call it a school shooting. But I think the more interesting piece of information was that the police now say that it was premeditated. The guy was loaded up with 1,300 rounds of ammunition. They say he went there knowing that he was going to do this and prepared well in advance for it.
Yeah, on the street corner, just shooting at random people.
We can't get an exact number of dead, but any dead is terrible.
Right.
But what would make some guy want to gear up with this much weaponry and just go to some place?
Oh, I know.
He probably,
that's just terrible. You never know who's in the area, and just someone just going berserk like that is just awful.
You wonder if he went to the campus just so that it would get classified as a school shooting.
Well, he very well could have.
That's of course going to break in all the news.
Well, you have to also look at the situation too. This really affected us nationally because the president is in the general vicinity.
Well, yeah, you have to, yeah.
And that right there, as soon as that happened, the Secret Service contacted that police department who was handling the shooting, and they said, brief us real quick. We want to be aware of the situation. Well, they determined that it wasn't an immediate threat to the president. But however, usually in situations like that in Los Angeles or anywhere in Southern California, the guy on CNN mentioned the other day, everybody and their brother owns a helicopter. And usually police helicopters are in the air doing some sort of surveillance of the actual event taking place. They were not allowed to fly the helicopters initially because of the airspace violation and control around the president.
Right.
Yeah. So you only saw ground units, which was really weird.
If he was going after the president, that he got stuck on the freeway.
Right. And our good friend Sean Savage out in Palm Springs, he owns a great big art gallery out there.
He got us a video.
He got video of the motorcade coming through Palm Springs area there, and we appreciate that. We shared that thanks to Sean Savage. But also in the news, out of South Africa, the South African leader Nelson Mandela, he's had a recurring bout of lung infection, and early yesterday morning, his condition deteriorated. He was transferred to a Pretoria hospital. He remains in serious but stable condition. The former president is receiving expert medical care, by the way, and doctors are doing everything possible to make him better and comfortable. But President Jacob Zuma, on behalf of government and the nation, wishes Mandela a very speedy recovery and requests the media and the public to respect the privacy, of course, of the family. And we do wish him the very best. And Ronnie, did you hear about this? The Obama-Verizon letter threats. A pregnant Texas actress who first told the FBI that her husband sent ricin-tainted letters to President Obama and the New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, then allegedly said she sent them because her husband made her do it. Well, she was charged Friday with threatening the president. Now, the lady's name is Shannon Guess Richardson. She's 35, and she appeared in a Texarkana courtroom after being charged with mailing a threatening communication to the president. The federal charges carry up to 10 years in prison, but she is actually a mother of 5 who's played bit roles on television and in movies. I do know she has been in different shows like The Walking Dead and a lot of others.
Well, this whole revelation, maybe I'm just extra cynical or sarcastic, but it brought up 2 things immediately in my mind. One was the anthrax attacks that happened right after 9/11, and the thought that maybe it's a good thing that they had.
Anthrax is different than ricin.
Well, yeah, I think it's more potent.
Still
than
poisonous,
ricin. Yeah,
but it's different.
They're both nerve agents. Anthrax can be naturally occurring, but the strand that was sent to around after 9/11 wasn't. It was developed in one of our defense research agency's labs.
Right,
but
and just got.
Ricin is a nerve agent too, but it's not as serious. So I'm thinking, well, at least the threats are getting lower in potential damage. Then, I realized the state that they had to be mailed from, and I understand that point. But the second is that why do people call the police to report their own crimes? Hey,
well, I don't
this
think
letter, I think I know who mailed this letter, and it's them.
Right,
who
but
mailed
I don't
the letter.
think she was thinking that they were going to turn it around and arrest her for it. She thought she was going to turn in her boyfriend or whatever.
The FBI doesn't have caller ID, and as soon as they cleared her boyfriend, wouldn't know who made the call.
Oh, I know, but sometimes we're not that intelligent.
I mean, if they can pick up my email through Google without my permission, they can tell when I call the FBI office.
Oh, they can tell a lot about you.
I'm sure they can.
And me too, because we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. I guess in California, I thought they had a big deficit out in California. Do they?
They did. When Schwarzenegger left office, they were worried about what they were going to do. They voted an ordinance in the general election to raise taxes and stuff like that. They had a huge deficit, billions of dollars, and they didn't know what they were going to do with. But I heard.
What happened to that? Is it still there?
No. Somehow I heard that it's not there anymore. Amazingly, but I'm not sure exactly what they did to get rid of it.
Well, I guess in Sacramento the other day. The board that oversees the California High-Speed Rail Authority on Thursday actually unanimously approved a nearly $1 billion contract to start the construction on the first leg of the $68 billion bullet train in the Central Valley. It's going to clear the way for work to start as soon as this summer on what officials have said will be a tight construction timeline. The board approved the $985.1 million bid.
I have to imagine that there would be a lot more people that would use it in the Central Valley in California, but we had a similar measure in Ohio a couple years ago where they wanted to build high-speed rail, and people here in Ohio fought it tooth and nail, and almost as much as they fought the casinos, and I think there was more of an ethical reason to fight casinos, but they passed those. But I don't think they ever came down on the pro side of high-speed rail in Ohio, and it came with a big grant to build the rail. We wouldn't even have to pay anything for it.
And Ronnie, you had one more item, I think?
Well, the Frank Lautenberg, the senator, died earlier this week.
Yes,
he was one of the longest serving in
our deepest
history.
Condolences. Yes.
Everybody was wondering what New Jersey was going to do. Of course, it was in the same kind of situation as Massachusetts was when Ted Kennedy died, and they had to sit somebody in his seat to take over until the next senator could be elected or whatever. And everybody was going to wonder how Chris Christie, because the governor of the state generally appoints whoever would need to fill the seat until a new person could be elected, was going to do. And a couple years ago when he first got elected governor, he said that special elections were stupid. They were a total waste of money, and New Jersey has a general election coming up in November. Then he announced earlier this week that he was going to hold a special election, which turns out to be 3 weeks earlier. And everybody was wondering how he could come to that since, he ran on a campaign that this was just wasteful spending when he got first elected governor. One of the speculations were that he didn't want to have to run against Cory Booker.
Did he actually think Booker would beat him? I mean, honestly.
Cory Booker's pretty popular.
Well, yeah, but also Chris Christie's pretty popular.
He is at the moment, but I think people respect Booker's wholesale philosophy more than they respect Christie's. I did it what I had to do at the time I had to do it, but wouldn't normally have done it if I wasn't pressured to, kind of thing. He's a Republican on the right of the middle right. You know, he's a little farther towards the far than he is the moderate side.
I respect both gentlemen, and but he did what he had to do, I guess.
He scheduled a special election. It's going to cost the New Jersey taxpayers $10 million, which he said was stupid when he first got elected governor. But it turns out that Cory Booker is now going to run for that open Senate seat and won't be running against Chris Christie in the general election. So it kind of all works out for Chris Christie.
Well, he'll have to make it up to the taxpayers of New Jersey somehow. That $10 million.
Whoever makes up $10 million, whoever makes up $1 billion.
It doesn't take too much
it's all
to
politics,
make it up anymore.
And Christie will probably win his election.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Congratulations on his bid to become healthier and to lose all that weight. I think we're going to see a new, fresh Chris Christie around the 2016 election, and I think he's going to be on fire. What do you think?
I think that today, the fleeting glance I had at Fox News had a chyron up in front of Mitt Romney and his wife that said, Romney, hopeful for 2016.
As far as a presidential bid?
Well, that's what else would 2016 be about?
Well, he's already said in
he's not going to he's not going to wait an
again.
extra 2 years to run for a Senate seat that he could run for in 2014.
He did allude to the fact that if whoever becomes president maybe would like him as a Treasury Secretary, for instance, that if called upon, he would be obligated to do something like that.
That's what we need him in, the position to implement all those crazy economic plans he had when he was running for president.
Oh, there's a lot of Romney supporters listening.
There may be, but, you know, there's also actual fact other than hopeful wishes, and the facts just didn't support any of his economic plans as being any kind of viable.
Well, he had a very good interview with Neil Cavuto on Fox News the other day.
Of course, a Republican watches Fox News.
Well, I'm telling you. And I looked at it as a fair and unbalanced, not to say the Fox slogan, but a fair and unbalanced way on the interview. And
you realize you're saying fair and unbalanced.
Oh, fair and yeah, I'm looking at a fair and balanced way.
Yeah.
I'm glad you corrected me on that.
Walk that back a little bit.
But he was very sincere in that interview. I believed everything he said.
That may be so. I didn't watch the interview myself, but politicians are generally more honest when they're not campaigning. So.
Well, yeah, and he's more relaxed, but that is the time when they
Dick Cheney looked like America's favorite grandpa when he was on the talking about his pacemaker replacement, and then a couple months later he's calling for Rice's head because she said the wrong piece of information a day before she could have even realized the actual truth of the information.
Well, by the way, that is the nomination of Susan Rice to
National Security Advisor.
National Security Advisor. You know what that does?
She got her a step ahead. She got her close to the president.
She's in the executive branch now, and they cannot subpoena her for any Benghazi stuff.
Executive privilege. But got her closer to the president, which is closer than the Secretary of State is.
Yes.
Department of State's under the executive branch, but the Secretary is a cabinet position. A National Security Advisor is more like a private consultant to the president himself.
A lot of people were saying that this was President Obama's way of thanking a good, faithful soldier for taking the hit on Benghazi.
Oh, she was good.
So I'm going to give you this position.
She didn't deserve what she got out of the Republicans and the right on Benghazi. And they keep saying there's some kind of scandal, but the facts show that there was no cover-up, at least nothing that she was ever involved in, and very little evidence, virtually none at all, that supports any of their claims that the executive branch had anything to do with it, other than the fact that the CIA is under the executive branch, and they're the one that designed the talking points about Benghazi, that they're crying foul for her talking about that Sunday morning after the attack. But it couldn't have worked out any better as a big middle finger to the people who kept her from getting the Secretary of State nomination, because now she has a more influential position with the president. Condoleezza Rice, the other Rice, was National Security Advisor to Bush. And look what all the national security changes and our foreign affairs policy and everything that happened while she was National Security Advisor before she became Secretary of State.
You're exactly right. Some breaking headlines and different things to discuss there at the top of the show. We've got a lot to get to today. We're going to be talking about the Bradley Manning court-martial a little bit later on and the Wikileaks scandal. But stay tuned, because when we come back, Big Brother is definitely watching you in a big way. We'll get all into that and tell you more, maybe that you didn't even know about, the NSA and the little secrets up their sleeve, when we come back here on The Parts in the Sum of the Whole.
when it comes to telephone calls, nobody is listening to your telephone calls. That's not what this program's about.
And there you go, Ronnie. President Obama speaking earlier this week out in California about the spying situation.
Yeah, Glenn Greenwald and the Guardian newspaper in Britain broke a story this week after they had obtained a secret court order from the FISA court that made Verizon have to give them complete records of the phone calls of all their customers, and everybody was just floored at that.
And this is only a like a blanket order, like a 3-month order. It goes from April 25th to July 19th, I believe. But this is something that the FBI is not unfamiliar with. They've requested this before on different other things.
Yeah, many people assume that probably a lot of the other companies have similar orders that they have to comply with. This one that we first found out about was just applicable to Verizon. The problem we had with it was that it was so broad. It was everybody's to and from phone numbers and how long the calls were. They like to call it metadata. It's everything but the content, but the fact that they were just spreading this broad, wide net is what everybody just was in shock over when the story broke.
Well, with what you just said, with the collecting of data, the location, the call duration, unique identifiers, time and duration of the calls, all of this is technically just going to be stored in their system, and if they need to use it to thwart terrorism or anything like that going on in the U.S., they have to again...
Well, here's what Obama continued to say about what the intelligence community wanted to do with this information.
Okay.
As was indicated, what the intelligence community is doing is looking at phone numbers and durations of calls. They are not looking at people's names, and they're not looking at content. But by sifting through this so-called metadata, they may identify potential leads with respect to folks who might engage in terrorism. If these folks, if the intelligence community then actually wants to listen to a phone call, they've got to go back to a federal judge.
It makes it sound like a benign reason, and if he's using it for the way that he said they are using it, and for the reasons they are, then that would be fine, but that wasn't the only story. The next day, overnight, the floodgates opened, and we found out about another program.
Now, where did this program come about? Who did this get leaked as well? Or?
Yeah, this one has to do with a program called PRISM, and we'll let Greenwald explain it to you, because he was part of breaking this story too, but it involves the tech companies like Google and Apple and Microsoft, and not the phone companies that, that sparked the story about the Verizon court order.
There are top secret NSA documents that very excitedly describe, boast about even, how they have created this new program called the PRISM program that actually has been in existence since 2007 that enables them direct access into the servers of all of the major internet companies, which people around the world, hundreds of millions, use to communicate with one another. You mentioned all those names.
It's a really, really wide, broad data collecting program.
I would say.
And the tech companies want to say that they're not willingly just letting the government tap into their servers. The government wants to say that the tech companies are, pledging their support, and the government just isn't going in and seizing the data. But at this point, it's a he said, she said. But the fact that it's going on at all, and to the extent of what the program is just really, really terrifying.
You're talking about everything from Skype conversations to Google searches to everything, a little bit of everything, Facebook information. All of that is funneling in and has been since 2007.
Right. These programs started under Bush. PRISM, as Greenwald said, began in 2007, but it was just a new version of an older kind of operation program called Stellar Wind, which was a lot of the same kind of data mining thing. You would think that, of course, we would say, oh, that was just Bush and Cheney and his administration, and things would have been different when Obama took office, but he just continued to use it. But he says that when he found out about the program, they really took a hard look at it, and here's what he said in another press conference.
I came in with a healthy skepticism about these programs. My team evaluated them. We scrubbed them thoroughly. We actually expanded some of the oversight. increased some of the safeguards. But my assessment and my team's assessment was that they help us prevent terrorist attacks. And the modest encroachments on privacy that are involved in getting phone numbers or duration without a name attached and not looking at content, that on net, it was worth us doing. That's, some other folks may have a different assessment of that. But I think it's important to recognize that you can't have 100% security and also then have 100% privacy and zero inconvenience. We're going to have to make some choices as a society.
Okay. So
it's all legal, I guess.
Yeah, it's they vetted it all and made it all legal. He keeps Congress has known about it. Congress writes the laws, so if it is legal, then of course Congress had to know about it. And there's another.
Well, how far does it go to where it's infringing on our constitutional rights to privacy?
Well,
or is it just thrown out the window?
It would fall under the Fourth Amendment, the amendment against illegal search and seizure. But the terms in the Fourth Amendment, like what's reasonable and unreasonable and what constitutes property and stuff, those are fluid terms that from time to time the Congress changes the definition of. And in 2008, they did something that just helped create what they could do with these programs like PRISM. And here's what the interesting thing.
And what makes it so extraordinary is that in 2008, the Congress enacted a new law that essentially said that except for conversations involving American citizens talking to one another on U.S. soil, the NSA no longer needs a warrant to grab, eavesdrop on, intercept whatever communications they want.
So when they changed that law to just protect domestic communications from a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil to another U.S. citizen on U.S. soil, they kind of didn't take into account the way that communication technology works now.
It doesn't just go from point A to point B in the U.S.
Right.
It travels along a circuit.
If you send me a text message, the whole text message in one chunk doesn't go from your phone to my phone, even if we're in the next, in two different rooms in the same house. Digital data is divided up into little pieces, and then those pieces are sent out across the network, and they want to go the path of least resistance. But if one of those packets leaves U.S. soil and goes through a server in China and back around the world, then
it's fair game.
If nothing else, the last little link from the server in China to going to your computer, that's a communication coming in internationally.
Right.
So if you restrict communication to just to and from on U.S. soil, that's kind of meaningless because that's just not how technology works anymore.
The NSA is able to go in, anyone at a monitor in an NSA facility can go in at any time and either read messages that are stored in Facebook or in real time surveil conversations and chats that take place on Skype and Gmail and all other forms of communication. It's an incredibly invasive system of surveillance worldwide that has zero checks of any kind.
So is there a way that we can just get our communications from like Ohio to California and not go around the world?
No, that's just the way it's set up. Everybody...
Of course!
Everybody...
Okay. I know that too. And where I see it the most is whenever you get maybe a bad email and it comes back, it sends you a email fail notice, and it'll show you the route that email took, and it's like a whole list of different checkpoints that it's gone through. That's where I see it.
Even if you don't know whatever the message in the email was, there's a lot that you can tell from just that information that nobody ever pays attention to.
So here's Greenwald again with a little update on what the National Security Agency's mission is in all this.
I think the crucial thing to realize is that hundreds of millions of Americans and hundreds of millions, in fact, billions of people around the world essentially rely on the internet exclusively to communicate with one another. Very few people use landline phone for much of anything. So when you talk about things like online chats and social media messages and emails, what you're really talking about is the full extent of human communication. And what the objective of the National Security Agency is, as the stories that we've revealed thus far demonstrate, and as the stories we're about to reveal into the future will continue to demonstrate, the objective of the NSA and the U.S. government is nothing less than destroying all remnants of privacy. They want to make sure that every single time human beings interact with one another, things that we say to one another, things we do with one another, places we go, the behavior in which we engage, that they know about it, that they can watch it and they can store it and they can access it at any time. And that's what this program is about. And they're very explicit about the fact that since most communications are now coming through these internet companies, it is vital in their eyes for them to have full and unfettered access to it, and they do.
Okay, so there's a lot more to this story, and since it just broke this week, I imagine there will be a lot more next week, and we do have a lot more that we would like you to know about. But I guess what surprised everybody was that Obama was doing this. What if he was a private citizen? How would he feel if he was one of us and not the person authorizing these operations?
Well, first of all, after Mr. Obama does leave office one day, he's going to get Secret Service protection for what, up to 10 years after?
Yeah.
So how private of a citizen is he going to be for at least 10 more years?
Yeah, technically he's a citizen now, and he does have personal space, even if he is the acting president, and all the eyes of the world's on him. There's a certain little space that's off limits in the White House. It's the president's. There's a certain division between public and private life, but these kind of programs, it doesn't seem like they'll draw that distinction. The aim is to gather in all the data about everything they can in case it can be used to some effect later, and they just scoop up everything and just save it, whether they need it or not. And that seems to be the whole point. But President Obama did mention his own standing in respect to how he feels about being a citizen and what these programs allow the government to do.
Right, and it was part of that conference the other day, so let's listen to him.
And by the way, with respect to my concerns about privacy issues, I will leave this office at some point, sometime in the next 3.5 years. After that, I will be a private citizen. And I suspect on a list of people who might be targeted so that somebody could read their emails or listen to their phone calls, I'd probably be pretty high on that list. So it's not as if I don't have a personal interest in making sure my privacy is protected, but I know that the people who are involved in these programs, they operate like professionals. And these things are very narrowly circumscribed. They're very focused. And in the abstract, you can complain about Big Brother and how this is a potential program run amok. But when you actually look at the details, then I think we've struck the right balance.
Well, so there you go. So the NSA, Big Brother watching, the story continues. We'll have all the very latest updates throughout the week on partsinthesum.com, of course, and we will be talking about this again next week, as we will our next topic, and it's on the way in the show. We're talking about the Bradley Manning court-martial and the WikiLeaks connection and all that. It's on the way next here on Parts in the Sum of the Whole. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's edition of Parts in the Sum of the Whole. It is June 9th. We hope you have a great start to the week. And we're in the middle of a lot of conversation. Wanted to catch you all up on the latest in the IRS situation. USA Today reporting that the Congress has convened 5 hearings. Top Internal Revenue Service officials have been hauled to the Hill to testify in some cases, ousted from their jobs. Lawmakers have requested reams of documents from the federal tax agency, but more than 3 weeks after the controversy over the IRS's targeting of Tea Party groups first erupted, there are still many unanswered questions. Right now, they know from May 2010 through about May 2012, the IRS Determinations Unit based in Cincinnati, which is one district over from Boehner's stomping grounds,
something like that,
flagged 298 groups seeking tax-exempt status for additional scrutiny. Of those, 96 were singled out because they were affiliated with the Tea Party, according to an Inspector General's office review of the targeting. Of the groups given additional scrutiny, none have been denied tax-exempt status so far.
None of the Tea Party groups. There's been some liberal groups that have,
right?
But the right won't mention those.
That's true. 28 withdrew their applications altogether, and another batch, 160 cases or so, as of December of last year, remain in limbo. So
you can't really blame the IRS though. May 2010, the midterm elections that the Tea Party got all the seats in Congress that they got would have happened in October and November of that year. Citizens United was ruled on.
But Republicans in Congress, namely Oversight Committee Chairman Darrell Issa, Republican from California, says evidence points to involvement from IRS headquarters in Washington. And actually, one Cincinnati IRS worker told the congressional investigators that it would be impossible for frontline workers to have come up with the targeting policies on their own, so that they were being thrown under the bus, actually.
The fry cook can't spit on the fries, but the CEO can have sent the frozen fries with spittle on them to the restaurant.
There you go. Well, anyway, so that's the very latest on that. We'll keep you posted.
Galileo and Copernicus got the whistleblower treatment for challenging the conventional wisdom that the world was flat and that the universe circles around us. And Galileo spent the rest of his life under house arrest. They were the pioneers of modern science. Whistleblowers are the pioneers of change.
Daniel Ellsberg is the source of the Pentagon documents. It is time to quit making national heroes out of those who steal secrets and publish them in the newspaper.
I began copying the Pentagon papers to give them to the American Congress and share them with the American public.
I came to realize that a wrongful war was going on and would continue to go on unless these lies were exposed.
He is the preeminent whistleblower in the deepest sense.
Whistleblowers have become a kind of fundamental part of how our democracy works.
Mark Felt, the former associate director of the FBI, revealed that he was the man that helped bring down the Nixon administration.
They have unquestionable patriotism and a lot of courage.
His testimony was a key to the eventual $246 billion settlement with 5 tobacco companies.
Jeffrey Wigand brought down Big Tobacco.
Former Enron employee Sharon Watkins, better known as the Enron.
Ex-cop Frank Serpico changed the NYPD forever when he revealed a multi-million-dollar payoff corruption scam.
You have to go up against the odds to do the right thing.
Karen Silkwood took on one of the biggest companies in America, crusading against America's nuclear power industry.
And in the face of fear, she continued to collect the documents.
Changed history. What Dan did.
Genuine American hero, Jeff White.
One of the main topics in this segment is the Bradley Manning court-martial.
Well, Amy Goodman put it together relatively well on the first day of the trial. We'll let her explain the state of things.
Private Bradley Manning, accused of disclosing a trove of U.S. cables and government documents to the whistleblowing website Wikileaks, and the largest leak of state secrets in U.S. history. Bradley Manning's 25 years old. He's already pled guilty to misusing classified material he felt, quote, should become public, but has denied the top charge of aiding the enemy. For much of the last 3 years since his arrest, Bradley Manning has been kept in harsh military detention, including many months in solitary confinement, prompting the UN's top torture expert to criticize the U.S. for cruel and degrading treatment. He could face life in prison, possibly the death penalty. Army prosecutor Captain Joe Morrow accused Bradley Manning of aiding the enemy, including Osama bin Laden, who allegedly accessed some of the classified State Department cables after they were published by the website WikiLeaks. Morrow said, quote, "This is a case about a soldier who systematically harvested hundreds of thousands of classified documents and dumped them onto the Internet into the hands of the enemy, material he knew, based on his training, would put the lives of fellow soldiers at risk," he said. Combs responded by arguing that Manning was selective, saying, quote, "He had access to literally hundreds of millions of documents as an all-source analyst, and these were the documents that he released. And he released these documents because he was hoping to make the world a better place," he said.
Well, I knew they would immediately take him somewhere like that. It was on the Marine Corps base there that they had some intelligence officers, and I'm sure some CIA individuals there in the interrogations and alleged torture that was going on. But you know what that was? That was primarily saying, why'd you do this? You know, you're not supposed to do this. Just drilling him.
Well, I don't think it was that. I think that the aspect of this that I've seen and heard brought up very rarely is what we should actually be focusing on. Here we have Bradley Manning. He's on trial for leaking information, even if you just consider the video, of which there is evidence of war crimes. And we got him in prison, subjected him to all this treatment. He's on trial for his life. It could be sentenced for the rest of his life, even technically death, even though the prosecution said they wouldn't pursue that, for showing the world that there had been war crimes committed. We're not going after the people responsible for them being committed, but we're prosecuting him. And one thing that I've never really seen talked about is the fact that Bradley Manning did exactly what he was supposed to do.
And this is in the Geneva Convention even.
Right. In the Constitution, it says that any laws that the legislature writes are to be considered the law of the land. Back when the Constitution was written, it was more a collection of states than it was one country with states in it. The states were more the focus, not the federal government. In setting up the government, the Senate was given the power to ratify treaties with other countries. And when those treaties were ratified, they became part of the law of the land. After World War I and after World War II, the atrocities that were committed in those two wars by all sides, nobody was completely innocent in any of those. We decided there were certain things that you shouldn't be able to do in the act of war. There were certain protections. Prisoners of war had to be treated
a certain way,
in a certain humane way. They couldn't be tortured, and there were all these other regulations. But because the Senate ratified that treaty, the Geneva Conventions are the law of the land, and the law of war is contained within them. And Manning fulfilled his legal duty to report what he had seen. He had a legal duty to obey lawful orders from his superiors, but he also had the legal duty to disobey unlawful orders. Section 499 of the Army Field Manual says that every violation of the law of war is a war crime. That's a quote. And of course the law of war is contained in the Geneva Conventions. An article in the Geneva Conventions describes making the civilian population or individual civilians the object of an attack is a grave breach of the law of war. When they fired on the civilians in the video, it violated that provision of the Geneva Convention. Another article requires that the wounded be collected and cared for. Another protocol says that the civilian population that goes to care for them shall be permitted, even on their own initiative, to collect and care for the wounded. And it goes on to say that no one shall be harmed while doing these humanitarian acts. When the helicopter fired on the rescuers, it violated those provisions of the Geneva Convention. And finally, the Army Field Manual, once again, even if you don't, view the Geneva Conventions as the ultimate law, states that, quote, the maltreatment of bodies is a war crime. So when the Army vehicle drove over the dead body, it violated that provision.
Right.
So,
but real quick, the two soldiers that picked up the little kids and started running to get them to safety and medical attention, that right there is helping them out. I think some of the guys on the ground there realized what happened, and it was bad. I don't think they realized what they were driving their Abrams tanks into.
They might not have.
Or Bradley tanks.
But that doesn't erase what happened before they got there. And that
was all from the Apache.
Even the U.S. Army says that the soldier has the obligation to report all violations of the law of war. When Bradley Manning went to his superiors to express this problem he had when he saw what was going on in this video, and they didn't do anything about it and tried to shut him down, those violations are still there. It's still a war crime. If his superiors tell him to not say anything about it, and they can see it's clear evidence of a war crime, then they're giving him an unlawful order. And he has just as much duty to disobey an unlawful order as he does to obey a lawful one.
Right.
So, in showing the world this video at least, he was fulfilling his legal duty under both international law and the Army's own regulations. And I don't think that's brought up enough. He did what he was supposed to do. We write these laws and make these conditions and make these treaties with other countries as much so that our soldiers, when they're in these situations, will be treated in the way that we would want them treated, as much as guaranteeing other countries that we would treat their soldiers in the same way. We do it as much for our soldiers, or more for our soldiers, than we do for other people's soldiers. But everybody got together and decided that there's a set of standards that should be followed. And if you don't follow them, then that's a crime. And that's why we have the International Criminal Court, and that's why we have the Rome Statute. That's the whole justification for the Nuremberg trials when he tried all the Nazis. Bradley Manning did exactly what he was supposed to do, and now the government is persecuting him for it.
You know, it's the third time, really, that I've been utterly devastated by being in that courtroom. First was when Bradley talked about his torture. Secondly, when he talked about why he leaked the documents and gave his political reasons. And this time, the government opens with a slideshow. And the slideshow is about how we are going to convince the court, it's only a judge trial, that Bradley Manning aided the enemy, just dumped millions of documents, has nothing good to say about him, and we're going to put him away for life. I mean, they didn't say that, but that's what happens if he's convicted. So your first impression of that is one, he's already pleaded guilty to 20 years. That he could get 20 years for. So what are they doing? You know, if you saw this in a country the U.S. claims is a dictatorship, and you saw a truth teller getting up and saying, this is what my country's doing, and then the country gave him 20 years, and then they went ahead and wanted to put him in life, people would be screaming. And people ought to be screaming about this.
Couldn't he actually face the death penalty?
Yes, one of the charges, the aiding the enemy charge, which carries a death penalty. And in addition to what's going to happen to Bradley Manning, because of this, the aiding the enemy charge, which we mentioned here, what they're really saying in that is that by giving documents to Wikileaks, a publisher, or could have been the New York Post or the New York Times, somebody somewhere in the world who's an enemy of the United States is going to read those documents, and therefore a soldier who is a whistleblower is automatically aiding the enemy if he talks to you, if he talks to the press anywhere. That's aiding the enemy according to our government. That's really an incredibly outrageous reading of the statute. The judge has gone a little bit toward requiring the government to prove a little more, but I think you have to have the intent to aid the enemy. But the government isn't saying that at all.
Well, according to the Military Times, the latest on the trial, they brought in Adrian Lamo. He was a hacker that Manning met online who eventually turned him in. Lamo confirmed that Manning never mentioned wishing the U.S. harm as a result of his actions. At any time, did PFC Manning ever say he wanted to help the enemy? Defense attorney David Combs asked, and not in those words, no, Lamo replied. And the trial is scheduled to resume on Monday, so we'll see what happens there.
Bradley Manning is a modern-day hero, and the Obama administration is on the wrong side of history when it comes to the persecution of Bradley Manning.
In today's world, it's easy to get tunnel vision with current happenings. You can get lost in the confusion. You need a chance to step back and see the whole picture of what's happening. On our weekly podcast, Parts in the Sum of the Whole, we take the whole picture and break it down to understand the parts of the story in the context you should know. We dig for the truth and try to find facts that some try to hide. We are not a political show or a news show, but we will discuss topics or headlines that are important to you. In general, Parts in the Sum of the Whole is the place to go to find out about everything. Tell your friends and join us each Sunday. Check us out at partsinthesum.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/partsinthesum, on Twitter at partsinthesum, or email us info@partsinthesum.com. Send us story ideas or just say hi, and thanks for listening. Get ready for this week's trivia question to win a great prize from our vault. Remember, only one person can win within a 30-day period. To win, just be the first person to post the correct answer on our Facebook page. Facebook.com/partsinthesum. Good luck.
And this week, your chance to win an iTunes gift card. You can get the latest music, movies, TV shows, games, apps, and a whole lot more. By winning this prize, you can download your iTunes content to any Mac, PC, iPhone, iPod Touch, or iPad. You know what it is. You love iTunes, and you can win an iTunes gift card with our trivia question. And be sure to listen closely, Ronnie, because there's a little clue hidden in the trivia question, but
I didn't think I was eligible.
Well, our trivia question this week is pretty much this. What is the most romantic city in the United States?
According to a recent poll.
A recent poll. What is the most romantic city in the nation? First person to post the correct answer on our Facebook page will win this iTunes gift card this week. So again, good luck to you, and happy researching. Maybe you know it off the top of your head. I don't know. You think people know what the most romantic city is in the country?
Maybe.
Well, good luck to you.
I see the cornfield. I don't think it's not romantic.
Okay.
Help us spread the word. Tell your friends to join us and like our page.
And as always, to wrap up our show, a little look at this week in history and some unique news from uniquedaily.com. That's all on the way. But here's what happened this week in history.
June 9th, 1954. On Capitol Hill, U.S. Army Counsel Joseph Welch confronts Senator Joseph McCarthy over his tactics in fighting communist subversion during the Cold War.
Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
It's the beginning of the end of McCarthy's political influence. Months later, the Senate takes the rare step of condemning him over his methods.
June 10th, 1967. In the Mideast, the six-day war between Israel and its Arab neighbors ends with a ceasefire mediated by the United Nations. During the war, Israel seized the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights.
June 11th, 1963. In what's then South Vietnam, a Buddhist monk immolates himself in the capital Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City. It's a protest against South Vietnamese leader Ngo Diem Diem for his crackdown on Buddhists. Diem is killed in a military coup months later. June 13th, 1971. The New York Times begins publishing the Pentagon Papers, a leaked top-secret study of America's involvement in Vietnam. President Richard Nixon's administration tries to block further publication in court, citing national security. Defense Secretary Melvin Laird.
It is our responsibility to call these violations of security to the attention of the Justice Department. This I have done.
But the U.S. Supreme Court rules the Times and the Washington Post can publish the material.
June 14th, 1940. During World War II, Paris falls into Nazi hands as German troops enter France's capital. That same day in German-occupied Poland, the Nazis open a concentration camp at Auschwitz. June 15th, 1215. In Runnymede, England, King John signs the Magna Carta, or Great Charter, granting liberties to his barons. The document shapes concepts of democracy and constitutional law around the world for centuries to come.
And, of course, that was courtesy of the Associated Press. And time for our wacky news. Let's see what's happening this week in some weird, unique news, or news out of the ordinary. It looks like we may not be getting the day off from work, but Michigan residents can now officially celebrate Talk Like a Pirate Day this September. I've always wanted a day like that.
You like pirates that much?
Arr! I could always imagine. I've always imagined like three pirates on the Wheel of Fortune, because when they call for the letter R, that would be the only letter they would call. It would be a boring show, but he would say, "What's your letter?" R. I'm sorry, that's been called already. Would be a boring show.
That was kind of corny, man.
Talk Like a Pirate Day, celebrated on September 19th, has gained increasing popularity ever since humorist Dave Barry mentioned it in a newspaper column back in 2002. And, well, he celebrated the passage by taking the podium Tuesday while wearing a black eye patch and saying, "It's time, and now recognized that the state of Michigan acknowledges this holiday R and grants it the recognition it truly deserves, matey."
What's a
I hope he said it
letter?
that way. Huh?
What's a pirate's favorite letter?
R.
I'm going to be corny too.
Here's a story about flat pack pets. That's hard to say. Say that fast five times. The flat pack pets are for those of us who simply can't have real animals in our lives.
I thought they were singing animals. Sounded like the Rat Pack or something.
Of course. They're because they're made of 100% recycled cardboard. And you can do all sorts of things that would normally be frowned upon with the animals, like putting them in the glove box for long journeys, using them as coasters during your next dinner party, and even coloring them with a permanent marker.
Well, you know,
my son
everybody loves
Chase
to cuddle
would like
with
to
cardboard.
What is it?
Everybody loves to cuddle with cardboard.
Yeah. So there they are. Flat pack pets. Get yours today. A contestant dressed as Santa Claus has won the right to call himself the undisputed office chair champion after breaking the tape at the end of the annual Danish Office Chair Championship 2013. This year's jamboree saw 24 contestants participating in 8 teams in the capital of Denmark, Copenhagen. The rules for the riders are simple. They rear down a hill perched on top of their wheeled furniture as they battled across the finish line first. To protect the contestants from falls and bumps, they all wore crash helmets, knee pads, and elbow protectors.
So it's kind of like soapbox derby, bumper cars, gladiator.
Yeah, maybe with a little bed race in there too, I don't know. Even though it's a chair, an office chair. Well,
as long as their posture's okay.
Have you ever been to Polden, Arizona, Ronnie?
I don't think I've ever been to Arizona. I'd love to go.
Well, you know, I think I've been through there definitely, but Polden, never been to Polden. It's a small and quiet community, but lately there's been some chatter over the new guy in town. It's actually a 9-foot tall metal gargoyle with a wingspan of 13 feet, kind of like our Mothman near Point Pleasant here, I guess. Compare him to. It's kind of symbolizes fire. Metal and fire has its own spirit, I guess. And the artist David Smith just moved into the neighborhood and says the day after he put up his prized possession, the county told him to take it down. Why? Well, it's not the size of the whole statue that has the county up in arms. It's the size of something else. You can go to uniquedaily.com to see the story.
I wonder if he came from Point Pleasant and was just building a Mothman out there.
I don't know.
I'm something that everybody objected to the size of.
The picture it shows on the net kind of looks like the Mothman, but you never know what this could be. But it looks pretty big compared to the building, so... and I'm not talking about what they're talking about. The statue looks big.
Well, I'm sure, relatively, what they're talking about would be big in relation to the buildings, too.
Anatomically correct, I guess you could say. So there you go.
No Ken doll.
Some wacky news for you on this June 9th. And Ronnie, it's about time to wrap up the show. Next week is Father's Day. It's already upon us, so next Sunday, June 16th, be sure to tune into our next podcast. And we're going to give you a chance to win in our trivia question, a special gift for Dad. Be sure to tune in to that. There you go, another show in the hopper, and we hope to see you. Be sure to tune in, all through the week, PSW News at partsofthesum.com. Until then, Ronnie, you take care, okay?
I'll try.
Thanks for listening to Parts in the Sum of the Whole. Be sure to follow our page all week long for the latest news from all over the world. Items discussed in the show do not specifically reflect the views of our source networks and media partners. Our weekly podcast is produced by Panman Media Studios. Visit our website, www.partsinthesum.com. Copyright 2013. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure